unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect karma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. I get to see and listen to, remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Bhagavad words. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Really nice to see everyone here. Morning, Brad. Morning, Jody. I have a very simple talk today. It's not a long talk. It's on a topic that I've been working on in my practice now for a while, and I just like to maybe bring up some things that I've encountered that I've found helpful. But I wanted to start off this week by talking about someone. Albert Woodfox died this past week from coronavirus. Named Alfred Woodfox. He was one of the last surviving members of the Angola Three. If you're familiar with the Angola Three, Woodfox, along with Herman Wallace and Robert King, became known about this due to the immense length of time that they each spent in solitary confinement. Albert Woodfox spent 43 years in solitary confinement. As a comparison, Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. So 43 years. And he was a Black Panther also. And he was originally in prison for armed robbery. I believe he had a 50-year sentence. And part of what Black Panthers did in prison was they educated others and helped others to learn to read, to understand the law, and understand the processes, and that didn't go over well. So he and another one of the Angola Three were accused of stabbing a guard in 1972. And they were then sentenced additionally and put in solitary confinement. I believe that charge was overturned 6 times. And he was finally released in 2016. I believe Herman Wallace was released in 2012. And he was released, he was suffering from liver cancer, and the judge told the warden who wouldn't let him out, that if you don't let him out, I will put you in jail. He died 2 days later of his cancer. But think about that. Woodfox was in prison for armed robbery and manslaughter murder and spent 43 years in a 6x9 cell for 23 hours a day, in which he endured claustrophobia, gassings, beatings, and other forms of torture. Woodfox was also a member of the Black Panthers. Among other qualities, Woodfox is remembered for his optimism and his resilience. He once stated that he would not allow the prison staff to define who he was.
What was that?
He once stated that he would not allow the prison staff to define who he was. So, I think the thing that struck out to me was I vaguely was familiar with Angola 3. I knew that there was something that I didn't understand about it. I didn't realize it was 43 years. And for those of you that are calculating, that's 84% of my life spent in solitary confinement. So what do you get to do when you're in solitary confinement? Well, you get to spend a lot of time with your thoughts. And one of the things that I've thought about as I study the mind and try to understand the body-mind interaction, just argue with the world, is what are thoughts? What is it that these things are? For a long time, when I didn't really understand my thoughts, I thought that they were just the logical connection of the next sequence of things that were going to happen. Not that I felt like I had control or didn't have control, it's just that they were what they were. So let's think about our thoughts for a second. Our thoughts about ourselves, other people, life itself, make up our personal stories. I have my story, Vicki has her story. We all have stories. We're all stories of each other. Now, these stories are an emotional foundation, one where we relate to ourselves and other people. Of course, there are other factors that can come into play that affect our emotional well-being. For instance, I occasionally experience hypoglycemia, and those things have an impact on your emotional states. But what I want to get at here is that these stories are stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and others about life. We argue with reality. The things that we experience, the things that we encounter, those are the things that make up our mind. I think about living where I live and having lived there once before and then not lived there and then lived there again. And there's a difference when you come back the second time because you've left, you've come back. And those thoughts and those experiences you gained from somewhere else get brought back into your universe, or in your universe, whereas they wouldn't have been there before. New thoughts, new ideas. Many of our stories are kind of a prison we put ourselves and others in it. These stories are laden with expectations, often an element of fear, greed, hatred, delusion. We ruminate. We won't get what we think we deserve or what we need. And there will be some loss or some harmful outcome to who we are as a human. The others need to understand us in order for us to be all right. That we need to control other people's thoughts and behaviors to be okay. Our minds are full of guile. The mind is clever at fooling us, so much so that we don't see the mental tricks. Once we establish a mental frame of reference with a just so story, to go along, we can find all the evidence we need to frame our story. This makes us think we are seeing clearly. We begin to see our delusions when we begin to wake up. And this is our practice, waking up to experience what is in front of us. Sitting zazen. Not reacting to delusion. By seeing the mind's tricks, we can begin to free ourselves from our mental projections and live a more deliberate life. You know, one of the things that when you begin to awaken, you begin to understand that you have feelings in your body. And those bodies we tie to emotions. But if you get caught up in the emotion and don't feel the body, you don't see the correlation. And so it's important to slow down and pay attention to what's right in front of us. Just as interesting and important, we can free others from the prison we put them in. The expectations we place on them by expecting them to see and experience the world from our eyes, and thinking they ought to think and behave in a way in particular. To be clear, who someone else is and what they choose to do is their business, right? At times, what they do spills over and impacts others, sometimes significantly, like think karma, think life and death, self-defense, slander. So this doesn't happen in a metaphorical bag. The key point here is recognizing the difference between reacting negatively to our delusion, our judgments, our just so stories, as opposing to recognizing the positive qualities through awareness of who we are and what we and others need in the world. Our practice is simple mindfulness. Our approach is family style. I've heard that now several weeks now. And it is. It's based on our relationship to the world and the teaching of the way from one to another.
Did you say family style?
Family style.
Like family?
Like as in family.
Mommy and daddy?
Mommy and daddy.
Okay.
Family style. Yes. So, our thoughts are experiences. Our thoughts are what we've encountered. Aside from soccer, which I watch a lot of soccer, or the occasional time on YouTube, which I don't do as often, I don't watch much TV. But I recently watched a show on Netflix called Alone. And I'll be honest, the name of the show is why I watched it. I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't think I'd like it once I got into it, but I did. The show is premised around a survival competition. You have 10 competitors, and they pick some remote place. So that the show's producers find some remote place and drop them in, each by themselves. And then they see who can survive the longest. And this time around, they chose a remote. It's the largest inland lake in British Columbia, but it's in the middle of nowhere. And so they dropped them on this lake, and they have to live entirely off the land. They have to build their own shelter. They have to manage their time, with the ultimate goal of being the last person remaining who hasn't tapped out. To be fair, they get weekly health checks along with an emergency satellite phone and what they call a bear banner, a loud noise machine. They can also pick from a list of items that they can take with them into the wilderness: a pot, paracord, multi-tool, warm coat, boots, gloves. They have to figure out how to fish, gather, make shelter, and outlive everyone else without knowing anything about anything. You don't know how your competitor's doing. You're just there. Their goal is to make it longer than everyone else. They all think that it will come down to being able to find enough food. What do you think? Do you think it came down to being able to find enough food? True, without being able to eat, they could be medically discharged from the competition. And some were. One guy lost 100 pounds. You go out there, you have this idea that it's all about being able to do what I know. They get out there, they think, I know how to live out here. One by one, they all started falling apart. One by one, their mind started to play tricks on them. One by one, they all justified why they wanted to leave. It was loneliness. It was with their own thoughts. They didn't know how to spend time with themselves. They'd never done it. The women handled it better than the men. The men couldn't wait to get home. Now, a man won it overall. That's just because he didn't lose so much weight that they had to kick him off. But they probably would have within a day or two. They lasted 70 days, over 70 days, which is not bad considering they put them out there September 15th. So they're out there in the middle of winter also. Anyway, the point being is that we think that we know how we interact with the world. We think that it's just a matter of knowing the things that we know to survive. And sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes we don't see the problems we're going to have. Sometimes we can't deal with our minds. And that's amazing. Because what is the mind? If somebody can tell me what the mind is, we'll have it figured out. Thank you. May the merit of this penetrate into each thing in all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha way. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desire